Hi everyone, welcome back to Lair Academy. It's Mickey again, and in this lesson we're going to be creating the database seeders to help us make our database models and relationships in the future. Let's dive right in by opening up a terminal, and let's create our first two seeders. We do this by typing PHP artisan make seeder and then followed by the class name. So we'll use a category table seeder and we'll follow up with a article table seeder. So we'll just let these two commands run. And that's great, so let's switch over to our IDE. Let's navigate to Database, Seeds, and then the Category Table Seeder. We know our category requires a name, so we're going to be using Faker to generate that name for us. Let's make sure we import at the top. We'll say use Faker/generator, and then we'll append an alias onto this as just Faker. So anytime we want to refer to this generator, we'll just use the word Faker. We'll let Laravel create the Faker class for us, so we'll pass that in as a parameter, and within our run function we want to run a for each statement, and let's create 10 different categories. So we'll use a range for this, and we'll just define it as a number. Now for each time we're in here, we're going to access the database, and we're going to refer to the table categories, and we want to insert a record into the database. Now like I said before, we need a name, and we'll use Faker to generate some words, and we'll just use a random number between 1 and 5. We want to make sure that we return it as a string. So far this is pretty simple, but let's load up our terminal and let's run this command and make sure that it works. We'll do PHP artisan db seed, and we need to follow up with the class that we're going to run it, and it is going to be the category table seeder. Once we hit enter, everything should be completed. We can double check this by going into PHP artisan tinker, referring to our database, grabbing the table categories, and then just seeing what's inside of it. You can see that we have 10 categories here, and they each have a random name associated with them. Now with one seeder done, let's move on to the second seeder, which is the article table seeder. Let's open that up in our IDE, and just like before, let's import the Faker/generator and make sure we use the alias Faker on there. Now within the run function, we're going to be doing pretty much the same thing. Let's create 10 different articles and assign them to categories. So once again, we can use for each, followed by the range of 1 to 10, and just assign it a number. Now the first thing that we want to do is select a random category from our list. We can do this by assigning a category variable, the database, referring to the table categories. And we want to make sure that we get it in random order, which is a Laravel helper function, and we just want the first item. So once again, we're just grabbing the first item within our random order from our categories table. The next step that we want to perform is inserting a record into our articles table. So we can grab the ID from our results. So we can say database table, we want to refer to the articles table, and instead of passing insert, we want to say insert get ID. So this will just return the ID of the record that's being inserted. We know that we need a title, and we will use Faker for this as well. And just like before, we'll generate some random words, and let's generate 1 to 10 words for the title. Make sure we return it as a string. And finally, we need some content. Once again, Faker comes to the rescue, and we'll use the real text function, and let's pass it a real text value of 200 to 300 characters. Now because we don't have our relationships or our models set up, we're going to have to add the link into our tables manually. We can do this by once again referring to our database, and the table we want this time is article category. Let's just insert a record here. We'll say insert, and we need two values. We're going to insert the category ID, and that will refer to the category variable and then the ID. And finally, we're going to need an article ID, and that's just going to be referring to the ID that we got back when we called the insert get ID. Now make sure everything's saved, and let's load up our terminal, and once again we'll run PHP artisan db seed, but in this time the class that we're going to be using is the article table seeder. So let's run this and see what we get. We have an undefined variable Faker, and that's an easy fix. I just didn't pass it into the run parameters of our function. Now with that fixed, let's try and run the artisan db seed again. Now that it's complete, again let's load up Tinker and let's have a look. we can access the database table, and this time we want to access the articles table. Just make sure that we have some articles in there. You can see we have title and content. While we're here, let's check the link, which is article category, and we should have a bunch of links in here that have the category ID, and then it has the article ID. And just like before, we could also check the category table if we really wanted to. Once again, we've already checked it, so we know that it is correct. Let's just refer to categories and not category though. Now our database seeding is complete. However, there's one more thing that we can do. Let's truncate these tables, and you can do this however you like. I'm just using Tynker to truncate the tables. If we switch back to our IDE, let's open up the database seeder. And you can see that we have a commented out function call here. What we're going to do is uncomment this and call the category table seeder. We'll copy and paste. And the second one we need to call is the article table seeder. We need to make sure that we call them in that order because the articles refer to the categories. Now we can just do php artisan dbseed, and you can see here it's running the category and the article seeder together. So we no longer have to run the classes. Now this brings the lesson to a close as our database is fully seeded. However, the next step is creating the models and relationships, and one thing we could come back and do once we have those is to use a factory instead of the database insert. Maybe we'll check that out later, but right now I'll see you in the next lesson.